Do you ever feel anxiety, depression, unworthy? That's a big one. Helpless, hopeless, indifferent, or that you are different? Like something's really wrong with me? Isolated, shame, wish I was somebody else, difficulty with intimacy? Have you wished you were dead? Have you ever felt so alone? Well, here's the thing. You're not alone.
We are here to tell you you don't have to be alone.
I'm Lori, and I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse.
And I'm Kevin, and I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. The statistics are that 1 in 4 women by the age they're 18 are survivors of abuse, and 1 in 6 men are also survivors of sexual abuse.
And there is a difference between men and women's sexual abuse. And that's why it's interesting that we're doing this together.
And that's why we're doing this together.
Exactly, because you are not alone, and we want you to know there is help, there is support, and you can walk through this. You can get well.
And most of all, there is hope. You have a purpose in life.
And often when you feel like this is the end, I can't do it, you can.
You've been through the worst. What is left is hard, but you can get through it because you've already been through the worst.
You've already survived it. So join us. We're here to hold your hand. We're here to walk this journey with you because we believe there is hope, there is recovery, and there is help. And in doing this, you are going to turn around and help the next person.
And we know you can do it, and we want to be supportive. Part of what we want to do is hear from you. We want to hear your stories. We want you to know that we believe you. We understand you. Most of all, we want to be there for you and pray for you.
And telling your story is so important, but it's hard, but it's important. Your story is important, and it matters to us.
You matter. We care about what you've been through and what you're going through.
And you are more than a statistic.
Yes.
And there is hope.
There is hope. So thank you for joining us. This is No Longer Ashamed.
So Kevin, what spurred you to do this kind of podcast? Because when I suggested with your voiceover, because you have this deep, awesome voice, that you do a podcast, you were like, yeah. And then you were like, this is what I have to do.
You know, it was a moment of thinking, who's going to want to listen to me? What would I talk about? But immediately I thought, well, I would do it about being a survivor, of course. And it just, I could hear God telling me, yes, that's a good idea. I want you to do that. And at the same time, there was a part of me going, are you crazy?
I might have said that to you.
Are you sure? Is that what you really want to do? And I have to admit, part of me was thinking this was nuts. But I got a clear message that this obviously was something that I should do. That, I did my testimony in church, and I think it all started in church.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that later, all the ramifications of that. But that's when I feel like it came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I gave my testimony of not only being a survivor, of also how God healed me and what God is doing in my life right now and why I feel like God has a purpose for me because of, not only being a survivor, but being healed from that. Now I'm living free of that, free of the bondage of the shame of being a survivor.
And your life is so much more than that. Yeah.
And I think that was God's intent was, yes, I want you to share that so that other people can know that they can be free of the bondage of shame, free of the bondage of having to hide.
Well, what has come up for me in doing this with you is that this isn't something you talk about. This isn't something you talk about at work. It's not something even you really talk about with friends, maybe a best friend and a therapist. And so for me saying, I want people to know that there are safe people to talk to. Yeah. And that telling your story makes a difference because it unlocks it a little more every time you tell your story.
Yes.
And what I have run into is sometimes I don't want to tell my story because people will say, oh, you had it so much worse than me. And then we have that thing people do. Yeah. And no story is worse or better than another. They're just our story. Yeah. And we I felt like I needed to share this in hopes that you might be listening and going, oh my goodness, I have been holding this in for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not your fault. I think that as an adult, you're still thinking, when it comes to that, you're still thinking like that child.
Yeah.
You can't really separate that. So there's that little kid going, oh, I'm going to get in trouble if I say anything.
Yeah.
And now we've become adults. And so now is the time to really start speaking your truth, get a therapist, listen to podcasts, tell your story. And in the podcast, we talk about safe people to talk to. I mean, we cover a lot of topics, but just that so many people have suffered childhood sexual abuse.
You don't have to be alone,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's hard to talk about. And we talk about what to expect when you do share your story, or who is a good person to share your story with, and what do you expect to get out of sharing your story. But I think the reason I'm doing this is just to show that through the process, there is healing, there is hope, and we don't have to live with this as being something that defines us. We get to define our own lives.
That is so awesome. And I feel like for me, I've lived a wonderful life.
Yeah.
And I don't say, oh, I wish that never happened. I don't wish it did happen, but it was just what happened. And when, we are going through so much in this pandemic with Black Lives Matter, with it being Pride Month, and my heart is hurting for so many people being judged and dismissed, and our stories matter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a story and you need to tell it, a counselor's a good place to start, but it's going to free you. Even though it feels scary, it's going to begin to set you free to live the life you were meant to live.
You don't have to hide your secret anymore, and you would be amazed at what freedom you get when you do share and when you do start doing the work. I think my main purpose in sharing in church even was to show that church was a safe place for me to share.
Which was, you were really brave, and it didn't feel safe to me.
But I knew that was because God had healed me. I knew that the church was a place where people wouldn't judge me because they knew that I was a believer, I believed in God, and that...
Yeah. Did you go through a stage with this where you were just angry? Like when you first started talking about it? I mean, did you go through stages? You mentioned grief, and it made me think, are there stages to recovery?
There's so many stages. and thankfully, I think we still go through them a little bit at a time, even after we've been through the big stages. There's
a trigger now and then.
Yeah. And, there's the grief and sorrow, there's the anger, you want to tell everyone about what you've been through, kind of the rage. And then there's this place you get to where you realize your life isn't revolving around this. It doesn't have to be defined by what you've been through.
Right, but when you're holding it as a secret, then it does define you. And that's where, for me, I would get defensive. If people said things, I would just get defensive, like, you don't know me and you don't know what I've been through.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I first went to counseling, because I had repressed memories. I just remember knowing something was so wrong, because I wanted to drive off a cliff. I really did. But I had this feeling if I did, I would do it wrong. And I would end up worse off, still alive.
Yeah.
But there was that period where I wanted to. And it took a lot of counseling, even when I went at 21. It didn't really come out. A lot of family history and mental illness and things in our family came out. But it wasn't until after I had my third child that I really started to recognize what it was. And as a child, sometimes you will repress a memory when you don't have anyone to go to. I don't think that was your story.
No, for me...
Because it was your first memory.
It was my first memory, and it was one of my strongest memories, and I remembered it my whole life. And then I got abused on other occasions when I got older. And I think, because when you're a survivor, sometimes, especially when you're a very young child as a survivor, you tend to steer towards abusive situations.
Right. And because you don't know, it's not right. It doesn't feel right. But then you're seeing that person either every day or, usually it's a family member, a big percent of the time.
I think also you don't recognize the signals as well,
right.
Because, and I don't know, but for me, I think the whole reason I'm doing this is just to get the message out that you don't have to be alone. There's a lot of survivors, and I also hope in doing this that more people, more men and women, will be able to realize they don't have to be alone, that they can talk about, and that this is an important thing to talk about.
Well, and for you, you started kind of with a group, right?
Yeah.
I always did one-on-one, and when I was in a group, I went to, it was early on, it was what they might call Celebrate Recovery now, but it was back in the day, so it was just a recovery. It was like maybe you're recovering from overeating, maybe you're recovering from drugs and alcohol or abuse. And so people didn't always say what they were recovering from. But I remember feeling like I had found a home in that group, but also I did not want, it wasn't that I didn't want to be judged, because I don't think I had that concept. But I think I still had that little girl mentality of they're going to think it's my fault. They're going to blame me. And, I think that, I don't know if that's one of the big differences between men and women, but a lot of times with girls, they're like, oh, if you weren't so cute, or if and then of course they threaten you if you tell. Yeah. And so it made me feel like it was all my fault. And so if I was to tell anyone, they would be like, well, you made that happen. Yeah. That's what, it had to be in the back of my head because I couldn't put words to it. But I think until I was an adult and it all started to come out, that I think that's really, I really did believe it was all my fault.
And I think that's one of the important things about sharing, is to realize these things that we keep secret, they still affect us, but we're not aware of how they're affecting us until we bring them up and until we start talking about them.
Well, and shame is so huge, and that's what Brene Brown talks about. And I know for me, I couldn't look in a mirror. My mom made me wear makeup at a very early age, and I would put it on, but I didn't look at myself in the mirror because I did not love myself. How could I? Yeah. And I think that once this all came out, then I was able to find a way to start to love myself. Yeah. But there's so much self-loathing, and I think sometimes when we're still hurting inside, then we hurt other people because we're lashing out, we're not dealing. So the biggest gift we can give our family is to get in touch with whatever happened, and whether it's a clear memory, whether you're having flashes. The one thing I love what Kevin says is you've already gone through it, so it's not going to be any worse than that.
Yeah, it's no fun going back and you kind of have to go back and revisit it and realize what happened to you wasn't your fault. It was done to you, and you didn't have a choice. And, it's still no fun to go back and revisit those things that happened to you, but it's important to realize, how they're affecting you, and then you can start turning it around.
And get the healing.
And get the healing, and get the hope. Get to hope.
I remember a childhood friend who I thought probably had gone through some stuff. And I remember she said, I'm not going to think about that or talk about it. I'm not going to be weak. I've got to be tough. I've got to be strong. And that is one of the biggest myths. And when we are willing to be vulnerable and be weak and in a safe place with a safe group, it is going to change your life, because that freedom that comes with finally letting go, putting words to it. And as a life coach, I always tell people this: if you have a story in your head, even if let's say you get a letter from someone and you're really upset, and so it's stirring in your head and you can't figure out where to put it, but the minute you tell someone, they don't need to give you advice. The minute the words come out, you start to be able to make sense of it. And I think that that's what happens, is we keep it so deep and dark that we never say the words. But when we do, that is where freedom comes.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing that the myth is that it's a weak thing to have to talk about, because it takes such incredible courage and bravery to actually share this story with someone. And it's not a weakness. I think when people say that, they're actually hiding behind this front, saying, no, I don't want to go there, because actually I think they're afraid. And, it is scary.
Yeah.
But it takes incredible courage. But by doing it, you're showing that you do matter, that you're actually taking a stand and saying, hey, wait, this did happen to me, and that wasn't right. And I do matter. I do deserve to get healing, to get help.
And I am such a firm believer that we are all here with a purpose. We're all here as part of a puzzle. And when we are stuffing it and we're maybe using drugs or alcohol or whatever
like
we're doing to cope,
so long.
Right? But whatever we're doing to cope, that's not life.
No.
But when you begin to let go of that, suddenly your purpose can become clear, because it's just, I feel like it's like helium balloons. Can you imagine having helium balloons in you and you finally open your mouth and they start coming out and you're like, oh, relief, they're just flying up and going away. Yeah.
You let them out, and then there's that release inside.
Yeah. Well, and this podcast is really to help people to tell their story, also to show a little bit of the difference between what men and women go through. And the thing that I've been really sad lately, not like depressed sad, but when I'm looking at Black Lives Matter, I just watched this movie about transvestites and how they're so judged in their life.
Yeah.
I feel so sad because nobody deserves to be judged.
Yeah.
And I think that we try so hard in life to just make it, to just be okay, that we think being okay is stuffing everything down, and really being okay is letting everything out in a safe place.
Yes. And not just being okay, but to actually thrive. I think in order to get to that place of thriving, to living the life that you deserve, to serving that purpose that we have. I mean, we do all have a purpose. As long as we're alive, there's a reason we're here. I really believe that. And I think we can't fully understand our purpose until we allow that secret out and are no longer being ruled by what happened to us.
Right. And I coach a lot of women in recovery. And the thing that is so amazing is that when you're able to tell your story and be free, I'll never forget being in this group. I was like, I had been a leader at this place, but I ended up in this new group we were trying to figure out with all these girls from the houses just out of rehab. And one of them's like, yeah, well, when I was a hooker and I used to, be doing the streets, and just talked about it so nonchalant, and I was like, it touched my heart so much. And the fact that they could tell me their stories made it easier when my turn came to share. But here's the best thing. When you share your story, you start to get the healing, you start to experience forgiveness, you reach your hand back and you grab the next person. Yeah. And I'll tell you, there is nothing more satisfying than hearing somebody's story and saying, I believe you. I can relate to this. And not that we ever wanted it, right? But that it's where we are, it's what happened to us, and if we can use it in a good way to help other people, that's truly, right?
Yeah,
what we want to do here.
We can help stop the cycle and turn it around and help people. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Right, and that doesn't name you. It never names you.
So I hope this finds you. And if you're looking for help, if you're looking for a hand reaching out, I hope that we can be that source for you to get to the help you need.
And if you know somebody that's gone through sexual abuse and is struggling, doesn't know what to do, pass the podcast along.
Yes.
Because we're all about hope. And Kevin really modeled that when he gave his testimony at church, because it's very different for a man to give a testimony. I think that's episode 3, than a woman. A woman's going to get a whole lot of sympathy. A man, well, I would say I didn't think a man would, but I feel like you were very well received.
No,
and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I think you will be too if you take that step, if you take that risk and find someone safe to share your story. And if you don't know anyone, or if you don't feel comfortable doing it in person, or if you just want to do it anonymously, reach out to us. You can share it on our site.
On our webpage. And also, if you're starting to feel something, just start journaling. Just start journaling and let whatever's going to come out. And then if you feel strong enough, get a counselor or find a group. And, we have the internet. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
When I was going through my recovery. I lived on an island, and I got to get off the island for recovery. And I think that was a real bonus.
So I think if you really need help, we have a list of resources, but we would also just love to hear from you and to hear your stories. If we can pray for you, share with you, let us know. We would love to be in contact.
So this is our introduction, and from here on out, we'll be talking about issues, and hopefully down the road, we'll be interviewing some people. There's been so many great podcasts I've listened to that the podcast wasn't about abuse, but the person shares in their story, in their story of getting to where they have been so successful, how they had to recognize and overcome that. I mean, I am living my dream life.
Yeah.
I work in radio. I'm a life coach. I can't imagine anything better. And I mean, today you're like, I got to ride the mountain bike.
For the first time in a month.
Because he had a car accident and hurt his hand. But that's the thing, is we are getting to live our lives.
Yeah, you do have a life that you deserve. And we hope that we can help you on your way to that life. Mm-hmm. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, you're very brave.
This is No Longer Ashamed.
So, Kevin, what's the deal with the salamander, or as I like to say, the dragon?
The fire dragon.
The fire dragon.
It's actually a salamander.
It
and
is.
That's the first point. And it's a fire salamander because they believed it survived fires. Mm. Because of the way it looks, it's black with, the red or yellow or orange spots, and it looks charred, like it came out of a fire. Mm-hmm. And there's truth to that, because a lot of amphibians do survive fires because they bury themselves in the mud or the logs or other things, and when there's a fire, they come out afterwards. And so, there's this mythology about them living through fire.
I really like that, because it's the survivorness. And I don't know if you know this about me, but my right hand, I've got a scar. And when I was little, I got burnt by coffee. I think my dad said, hey, get me a cup of coffee. And me being little, I was like, oh, I'll get it. Anyway, and I burned myself. And there's something about, even though it wasn't fire, it was burning. And there's always been something about this scar to me that has been survivor. It's like a symbol of, I made it through that. And I feel like when you told me about the tattoo you never got.
Yeah. And that's what the salamander is all about, is the tattoo I didn't get.
Yeah.
And we will discuss that in an episode coming up.
And on our logo, you can see it's kind of a cute little face. And I love it that my friend is like, well, women aren't going to get this. And it's like, but you know what? It's about surviving.
Yeah.
And once you know that, once you know this story, that the salamander dragon is all about surviving,
going through the fire.
Yeah.
And it's also geeky about, salamanders, because when I was a kid, I was very geeky about lizards and snakes.
Well, and I raised boys, and they loved the salamanders. So I feel like it's such a great symbol of what it means to survive, and that they dig down under, they find a way. And that's what I love about survivors, is that we find a way, whether it's physically, emotionally, we find a way. And for me, it was checking out. And so then I had to learn to not check out as an adult. But there's that verse in the Bible that says, when we are children, we behave as children, and when we become adults. And so I had to kind of unlearn that survival behavior, which is really awesome that we can do that. We don't have to hang on to that for our whole life. We can turn that around. But just the recognition of a fire dragon survives, and we survived. We survived the fire.
Through the fire, and we're on the other side. And so that's why we use it as the symbol for our podcast.
And I think what's so important to us is that people know there is another side.
Yeah, the other side. So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I just want to thank you for all the blessings you've given us, especially for this time that we spend looking to you for your guidance, for your hope, because without you, I wouldn't have hope. And also for your healing, Lord. And I just hope that these words will find those that need them, that we can pray for those that are feeling alone, that are feeling helpless, that are feeling lost. Lord, I just pray that you would fill them with your love and with your hope in their lives. and with your presence right now, Lord. I just pray for your presence in their lives.
And Father, I thank you so much for this opportunity to use the pain that we've gone through to reach out to other people. And Father, that there is forgiveness. And I know that's a scary word when you're first walking through this. Forgiveness is the last thing you want to hear. But Lord, it is freedom. And I thank you so much that this, whatever happened to us, doesn't name us, that we can be victorious, and that you are such a good God, and that your heart grieves when children are hurt, Lord. And I just thank you so much. It's that crazy mix of who you are and how you let us be free, which means everybody gets to be free. And it's so hard to comprehend, Lord, but I thank you. I thank you that we've been able to walk this journey. And I pray that whoever's feeling a little bit nudged, that maybe they know something, that you will just help them to know what they need to know enough. Lord, thank you that you don't give us all of it at once, that it's step by step in a healing process. And I thank you for this journey. And I thank you so much that and I'm just so grateful that I live a life of freedom, that this isn't holding me back any longer. In your Son's holy name, amen.
Amen.